I don't think it'll come as any surprise to you that I am not a fundamentalist. That is in part because I don't buy into the idea of biblical inerrancy, the idea that the Bible contains no factual errors, at least in what are called the original autographs, the original writings that are long since lost. But there is a similar term that is often confused with inerrancy, but one which I can embrace with some qualifications. That term is biblical infallibility. Sounds like the same thing, but it's not. So what do these two terms mean, and how are they different? Let's find out. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Thursday, September 14th, 2023. The idea of biblical inerrancy has been around for quite a while, but really gained traction in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as a reaction against what were then new methods of biblical interpretation. I talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago in my talk about fundamentalism. In short, the idea of biblical inerrancy is the notion that the Bible contains no historical or factual errors. The one caveat believers in this idea will allow is that errors may indeed have crept into the copies of various parts of the Bible as they were copied by hand over the course of hundreds of years, but if we were able to recover the original handwritten documents, we would find error-free texts. This all comes from a fear, I take it, that if we can spot historical or factual errors in any part of the Bible, then it would call into question the trustworthiness of the entire Bible. But any careful read of the Bible will surface any number of factual and historical issues. There are too many to go into here, but for those of us who are not fundamentalists, Genesis chapters 1 and 2 are a case in point. A careful comparison of these two chapters plainly shows two very different accounts of creation. They differ in a whole slew of ways, but the most obvious is that they depict a very different order of things. In Genesis 1, God creates humankind on the sixth day, the last day of creation before God rests on the seventh day, after all other creatures have been created. In Genesis 2, on the other hand, beginning with verse 4, God creates a single man first. Then God creates animals as companions for the man. Finding none of the creatures to be worthy companions, then God creates woman. Fundamentalists do not believe we have two different creation stories here, but one, and they work very hard to demonstrate why the different accounts actually fit together. Moreover, they believe that God created the heavens and earth in 6 actual days, and following the calculations of an Irish bishop named James Ussher, they believe that God created everything in the year 4004 BCE, on October 22nd, to be exact. Ussher calculated this date by a careful count of years mentioned in genealogies in the Bible. It is a remarkable feat of mental gymnastics to make all of this fit together, and in the end, it's unnecessary. Why do I say that? Because I, like many Christians, do not accept this account, and yet I have a deep and abiding faith, a faith that is only strengthened by reading Genesis 1 and 2 as different accounts of creation. Why? Because I take these stories to be theological accounts, not historical accounts. Their purpose is not to give us a factual history, but to tell us a much deeper way who God is, who the creation belongs to, and how we as creatures relate to the Creator God. It does not add to my faith to place my faith in defiant opposition to the powerful claims of science and reason. To reject biblical inerrancy is not to call into radical question the theological claims of Scripture. It is to read the Bible for what it is, a collection of faithful accounts of God's people with the living God whom they've encountered. Which brings me to our second term, biblical infallibility. Biblical infallibility does not mean the same thing as biblical inerrancy. To put it simply and plainly, biblical infallibility simply means that in matters of faith and practice, the Bible will not fail us. We may misread the Bible and we may draw false conclusions from it, but the Bible itself is ultimately trustworthy, which begs the question, what are matters of faith and practice? It does not mean a belief that every statement in the Bible is literally and factually true. The example of what the Bible teaches about creation is only the highest profile example. Rather, it means that when it comes to the foundations of our faith, the Bible is a trustworthy source, indeed, the trustworthy source for our knowledge about God, God's will, who we are, and our relation to God and to one another. A belief in biblical infallibility is not the same thing as a belief in biblical inerrancy. Understood this way, I embrace the notion of biblical infallibility, even as I reject the claims of biblical inerrancy. The former helps root my faith. The latter is, well, an unfortunate error. Tomorrow, the biblical and theological meanings of justice, and it's probably not what you think. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.